Hey, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Good to be with you. And hello, kia ora, good morning to one and all. Morning, Chewy. Morning, George.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hey, George, I've had people ask me, could you know how you look at your screen, George? How you look at your screen when you're typing? Yeah. Now, show us, has he got like a missing ear or, so we just needed to check that because the other side of your face. How you doing, Chewy?
Good, mate. Good.
Good morning and welcome. I've been talking, in fact, we talked last week, George, about the show. I should bring it up, LOL. Last one, Laughing. It's a show full of comedians. And there is a LOL Canada. It's on Amazon Prime.
I had someone telling me about this the other day, actually. I've been meaning to check it out.
There's a comedian on there who every time I watch him, I just think of you. He's a comedian. And he looks like you. And he kind of sounds like you a bit. I can't think of his name. I'm just having a look. I'll try and find a clip of him. And he's, I was wondering if you'd snuck over to Canada and done a bit of a short stint on this show at any stage. Here he is. Here he is. Let me bring up this screen. This is good. This is good. Good news show right now, isn't it? Trying to find something on the internet. All right. No. See that guy there with a cap on? Don't you reckon that looks like Chewy, George?
He's got a beard, yeah.
Let me see.
I got a lot of Zach
Galifianakis
comparisons at times.
Hang on, wait for it. No, that's kind of mockery. That guy there. Now, come on, a little bit.
That guy there's a bit more buff than Chewy, right?
Not the Asian guy. We're not talking about the Asian guy.
I mean, buff is the wrong word.
That guy.
Substantial.
Look, honestly, I mean, I'm just saying, Chewy, if your beard was a bit longer and you had a cap on and you had your normal glasses on that you don't want to wear in public because you're embarrassed by them, there's a similar. All I'm saying is it's actually, looking side by side, there's actually quite a good similarity. Don't you reckon? Yeah. A little bit.
I'll take it.
You'll take it. It's a compliment. It's not. There's not nothing in it. He's a very funny man. Anyway. Good to see you guys. Good to be back. What are we talking about today? All sorts of stuff, actually. We are going to be covering off, obviously, the biggest kind of news story in New Zealand at the moment is what we're doing with COVID under the traffic light system, which I still don't entirely understand, the traffic light system, to be honest with you. But we are staying in red, but some things have been reduced. Like I think from yesterday, you didn't have to check people's vaccine passports at cafes anymore. Ooh. And today, but yesterday we also got announced that we're going to stay in red. So we'll have a look at some of the reason around that. And there's a new magic pill that's come out. A magic pill that basically, if you catch COVID, it seems like it'll help you a lot. We're going to talk a bit about that as well. They talked about it this morning on the AEM show, I think, Ashley Bloomfield, but they didn't talk about the criteria for it. So he basically said it's available to people. The criteria is on the Pharmac website, but they never talked about what the criteria is. So we'll look at that today. We'll look at what the criteria is. So then people will be informed and they'll know. Also, not to kind of beat a dead horse, but this whole, probably a bad analogy to use, beating a dead horse, but this whole Will Smith conversation has been going on. People have been asking the whole week, what did Denzel say to him? Well, Denzel has come out in a interview and talked about what he said to Will Smith. We'll have a look at that. And then on the back of that, the Grammys were yesterday as well. And gosh, got some things to say about the Grammys, including it now appears that you don't need to be a musician or in the music industry to get a Grammy. And there's got so many categories now that, like, there was a New Zealander who won a Grammy yesterday. Did you know that, Chewy?
I did not.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, because there are so many categories now, like so many of them. I think proportionally to the world population, we should be expecting at least one New Zealander to win every single year. There are so many categories. So we'll have a look a bit about the Grammys. And also, speaking of Will Smith and what's going to happen to him, Louis C.K., a comedian who was, do we say cancelled? I hate that word so much in this context, but
he was held up as someone that had been cancelled.
Is that the right word? Cancelled?
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right. So who was cancelled in 2017 won a Grammy yesterday. So he's back. So what's going to happen to Will Smith? Yeah. So we'll have a look at a bunch of that stuff. And also the, I don't know if it's called the Academy, but the Grammy people are kind of like, they actually said, we don't look at the background. We don't look at your criminal record. We don't look at any of those kinds of stuff. And then in the same show, they wouldn't let Yeezy perform because he sent some untoward Instagram accounts. So we don't look at your background at all. Doesn't matter what you've done, murderers or anything. You can win a Grammy, but look, you can't perform if you're hassling Pete Davidson too much. It's just a bit strange what's going on at the moment. Anything to jump in with? Big news with John Campbell. We might have a look at that. We might not. I don't know. We'll see. That pretty much is the news, isn't it? That he's moving away from TVNZ Breakfast to do other things. Yeah, and that's about us. Morning, team. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can always join in by sending us a message. If anyone did, last Friday we talked about LOL. We talked about Manifest. We talked about, what was the movie you talked about, George?
The beta test.
The beta test. And we said if anyone did check those out, make sure you let us know next week. So if you're watching, you did check those out, make sure you let us know. Right. Shall we get into it? I guess the question is, where do we start? I think we start with, probably we should start with the thing that's the news story. Probably. So we found out yesterday, thanks to the Prime Minister, that we are staying in the traffic light red zone for at least another 10 days. What that means for the whole country, we're not entirely sure of yet, but let's have a little bit of a look at what the Prime Minister said when the announcement was made to stay in red.
But while case numbers are dropping in some parts of the country, such as Auckland, Wellington and Tairāwhiti, others aren't yet in the same position. Hospitalisations have dropped in Auckland recently, but continue to plateau or increase in regions like Canterbury, Waikato and Northland. Hospitalisations are not expected to peak in some DHBs until mid to late April. Public health advice tells us now is not yet the time to ease the existing restrictions and drop down to orange. We're doing well, but we're still in a large Omicron outbreak in New Zealand. And while we're moving in the right direction, we're not out of the woods yet. And so for now, New Zealand will remain at red. The next review of the traffic light settings, though, will be on Thursday before Easter, the 14th of April.
There you go. That's the announcement of yesterday. I just want to see as well, and this is completely off topic. Sorry to do this, guys. But there was a sign that there was a symbol that the signer made. Let me see. That one. What's that? What does that mean? This one, kind of like that. What does that symbol mean? The person doing sign language. You watch. And wait for it. That one. Yeah, anyway, it's just my ADHD brain going off and seeing something in the side there, isn't it? So the announcement was made yesterday that we are definitely staying in red for the next 10 days. Now, obviously, one of the main and first questions the PM will get was, what about Auckland? What about Auckland? Auckland, we're all being told that Auckland's over the peak. Why aren't they going to orange? And it was actually said by one of the journalists, when Auckland was in level 4, when we had the levels and the rest of the country was out, like the rest of the country didn't have to carry Auckland. Now that Auckland's over the peak, why is Auckland having to carry the rest of the country who are still in their peak? And this was the response to that.
Look, and we've always said that there is the possibility of moving regions to different levels at different times. So, and that possibility still remains for Auckland. It is possible that we can move them in the future to orange while other parts of the country are in red. But as we've said, Auckland has made significant progress, but we do still have a relatively high hospitalisation rate. They carry a significant number of the hospitalisations in New Zealand are in the Auckland region. We need to look after our healthcare workforce. So just a small visual aid. So this is the Northern region occupied hospital beds. So you can see that we are coming down, but this was the medium transmission expectation. And so we haven't even yet reached the top of that curve. So it is declining, it is making positive progress, but it is off a relatively high base. And so we do need to be mindful of the pressure on the system.
I think that's a really good thing to look at, because people are going, why? And I think the Prime Minister has really spelt it out quite bluntly there, is that the modelling they've done, they needed for Auckland to come out of red. They needed the peak or the number of hospitalizations to come down to where the top of that yellow one is. And look, it's not quite there. So when the PM explains that, I mean, still, whether you agree or disagree, you can at least acknowledge and see that they've had a plan and that plan hasn't quite been hit yet. So that's why. Now, you're still entitled to go, that's fucking stupid, but they've at least explained now why. Chewy, what are your thoughts, man? There's more to come on this. We've got more to say from Professor Michael Baker, but for now, jump in, mate.
Yeah, I mean, Auckland has done it tough, and I kind of get that. But every time I hear Auckland should be stepped down before anybody else, it just makes me angry. I don't know why. I don't know if that's justified or not. It's just like, oh, come on, we're all doing it. Just chill. And it's certainly a little bit of a moment from work the other day is obviously we took down our QR codes,
Right.
and our numbers limitation sign, and that was just a little bit of a okay. Of course, we all knew it was coming, but it happened, and I guess we don't use the COVID tracker anymore.
Chewy, have you come across in the retail world or whatever, any businesses retaining the the vaccine pass and that sort of thing?
Not so much. I think the people that still do have it up is probably more out of I'll get round to it rather than any particular position that they're taking. One thing I found really interesting, my wife and I went out to Emerson's for a meal on Saturday, and they were being very stringent. They were scanning vaccine passports. They were table service. If you got up from the table, they were asking people to put masks on. So, I mean, that was good to see. I think a lot of the comments from hospitality, I saw someone on Twitter this morning saying, hey, look, hospitality saying they want people to come out, but their relaxing of rules makes me less likely to come out. I feel less comfortable doing it. So
we had on one of a spokesperson from the EMA a couple of weeks ago, Chewy. I'm not sure if it was with you or not, but he was saying that what's happening at the moment is people are basically self-imposing lockdown. People aren't going out because they don't want to go out, because they don't want to get involved with it. Which I actually think kind of echoes what I guess what we've all been thinking is the best case scenario, is that people are self-monitoring. The only problem is, we all, I don't know if you guys are the same, maybe I am, because I've got kids at high school and stuff. We're all hearing of the families that are refusing to participate, refusing to wear masks, refusing to do rat tests, and they're coughing away and then going off on school trips. It's a literal situation I know of. And they're going to come back having passed on COVID to their whole class, who's then going to pass it on to all their families. So I'm interested as to what happens with the numbers and the number of us who are kind of self-isolating, wrong word, but taking more precautions, let's just say that, to try and help it, versus the absolute assholes out there who are not worrying about it and just kind of spreading COVID around the community because they refuse to participate, or they think God's on their fucking side, or whatever the reason is, where that tipping point is. I'm not any more likely today to go, cool, let's go to a cafe, now that all those people are now going to be sitting at the seat opposite me because they're allowed to.
Yeah. One thing I saw mentioned with if we were to drop down from red, is that removes a lot of protections around mask wearing at schools and stuff like that. And of course, that's where our biggest reservoir of unvaccinated people are, is the kids.
Let's have a look at that, because I think that's what Michael Baker goes on to say. Speaking after the announcement, University of Otago epidemiologist Michael Baker said the cautious approach had served New Zealand well throughout the pandemic. He says this, quote, I think it's really paid off in terms of minimizing illness and deaths from the virus. I'd also say the evidence is really very compelling internationally that protecting public health also protects the country. He went on to say Auckland's now about just below 15% of its peak today in terms of numbers, but that's still a lot of cases. And those people are a huge drain on primary care. He went on to talk about the idea of going back into orange, and he kind of echoes what you've said. He said, one of the reasons I was concerned about moving to orange is that it would mean at school you'd no longer have a mask requirement. You only have 10% of kids fully vaccinated. You've got very few barriers to the virus spreading even more widely amongst school students. So that's what Michael Baker was saying after the announcement of staying in red. So yes, similar to what you're saying. I guess maybe Michael Baker is listening to your advice there, Chewy.
Yeah, it's always good when we're on the same page.
Yeah,
I
and that
appreciate
basically, and if you look at the numbers, I think it's under 30s and under 20s are the biggest cases of in the country at the moment. They certainly have been at some stage during this period. So in other words, they're going to keep in red until at least the week the week of Easter, which is next week, and then it's 2 weeks school holidays. So that means there's not going to be any maskless days at school in the next 3.5 weeks. Because end of next week is end of the term, then there's 2 weeks holidays. So basically, the government's given themselves a month before schools go back to worry about masks. I actually wonder if that's the reason. I wonder if the reason is purely around not having, maskless schools. It could actually be.
Yeah, it sounds pretty solid to me.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I realized about this Auckland thing, and we'll move on to the next part of this conversation. Anything you want to jump in, George, before we move on to the next part of the conversation? Look, you can see George, right side of George's face there. The other thing that I think comes up later in that press conference, which we didn't show, is another reason that Auckland hasn't gone down to orange yet, is half of the hospitalizations are happening in Auckland. Now, we all know Auckland's big, but they're not half the population. So if half the hospitalizations are in Auckland, like the new hospitalizations are in Auckland, that means there's still enough going on for them to decide to keep it at red. And I think, again, just working on a per capita situation, that sort of makes sense. If it was like 10% of the cases that were in Auckland, you'd go, yeah, of course, drop out of red. But if half of the hospitalizations are coming from about a third of the population, then that still says there's enough going on there to keep it in red for another 10 days. Yeah? Yeah. All right. The other thing that's been talked about is this new XE variant coming out, which does sound like the new iPhone. But actually, speaking of new iPhones, Chewy, let me just ask you something, because I don't know how all these traffic lights work, and you work in a sector where you come face to face with people. Under the current system with no mandates, is it also no masks? So are people walking into stores with no masks?
No, we haven't seen that at all.
Okay.
People are still wearing masks.
So the current rules are still masks in shops and cafes and stuff. Okay.
Yeah. We've lost the say in my shop we could take four bubbles. I think we interpreted it as in the shop at a time. That sign is now gone. There's no requirement to sign in with the COVID tracker, but masks are still strongly encouraged in store. And none of my colleagues are wanting to relax that one little bit.
Oh, that's good. Good for you guys. All right, let's have a look at the new XE variant as well. There was a conversation with Ashley Bloomfield this morning on TV3, and the TV3 AM show asked him the question, is this new XE something we need to be worried about?
Well, it's certainly something we need to keep a watching brief on. And one of the things about XE to explain is it's actually a combination of the two Omicron subvariants, the BA1 and BA2 subvariants. So these viruses are constantly exchanging genetic material. So the XE variant seems to be maybe about 10% more infectious than this BA2 variant that we've got quite widespread across the country at the moment. We haven't yet seen it here in New Zealand. It's been found in a number of countries in Europe, but relatively small numbers of it so far. We'll be watching it closely.
If it did come to New Zealand, would that significantly change the advice around the traffic light settings?
Well, we would have to see, really. At the moment, what we would want to look at is, for this variant, but also any new variants, really, what are the characteristics of it that would mean we'd have to use some of the other measures we've used in the past, and that includes some of the traffic light measures around stricter indoor limits. Of course, we're retaining the use of masks, and I can't emphasise how important that is, not just for Omicron, but for those other winter illnesses that we know will start to come across the border. So we would look at the characteristics of this variant and then look and see what are our measures we currently have in place, and are they sufficient to sort of try and keep the numbers of it down at a level we can manage.
So, So, look, I've already just noticed as we've been talking that I've had 2 notifications from various news sites saying the birth of XE. What is the new COVID, variant coming out? That it's going to be, this will be news today. And I guess what Ashley Bloomfield is saying this morning is, I mean, he's not quite saying chillax, but he's saying we don't have enough data yet. It's new, so we'll have to wait and see. Other than it appearing to be more infectious, we don't know too much about it. Chewy?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to be looking at Australia basically to see what's going to happen here. They're doing all the advanced recon for us, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
especially with travel between Australia and here being open now. And we don't have MIQ anymore. So yeah, it's a fun one. I'm enjoying all this talk about it's more infectious again, and it's everywhere. And just a reminder, winter flu season coming up as well, and we hear that that's going to be a tough one as well. So yeah, it grinds you down a bit.
Oh, look, dude, it completely. And I mean, we had a conversation the other day with Michael Plank, and I was just like, just tell me when this is going to be over. You know, we've been doing the right things in this household for 2 years. I'm over it, especially when you see other people not doing the right things. And I have an absolute and total desire that even people who are misinformed, ill-informed and misinformed, who go out there and catch it, that they still have a really, really, really minor version of it. I don't want to see anyone, kind of suffer with this thing, but it does become a smidge frustrating when those same people are like, well, see, it was no big deal. I got over it. It was no problems at all. And it's like, ugh. So it just echoes that idea that we're doing all this hard work to bring people through who don't believe in the system, who are then getting a really easy course. Are you still with us there, Chewy?
I can hear you.
Maybe why don't you disconnect and reconnect, and we'll bring you in again just in case that was the situation that's happened. It's what happens with live things. Anyway, George, I mean, should probably wait for Chewy before we play this last clip so we can see it. Is there anything you want to jump in on that, XE? I mean, I'm hoping what we constantly are being told by various scientific people is that the path of most viruses, it becomes more infectious and less toxic. Is that the right? Less serious. I mean, hopefully we'll see that in XE, and eventually making it clear that I'm not calling this just a flu now, that it may turn into just a cold or just a flu type symptoms in the long run.
Yeah, we're gonna hear these various variants, mutations for a while, right? I swear there was another one, a few weeks ago that kind of got lost in the news cycle somewhere there, that has sort of disappeared.
Yeah, we shall wait and see what happens. All right, we're going to keep on moving. I've just got a text from Chewy. He's restarting his computer, so we'll keep tracking. This is really interesting, I think, because there is a pill out by Pfizer called Paxlovid, and Paxlovid is said to be sort of a cure-all. It's not really a cure-all. We'll let Ashley Bloomfield explain what it is, but it's something that internationally they've been using with the more serious cases of COVID, and it's been really positive and really helping. So let's just have a look about the conversation that these guys were having on the AM show this morning about this new product Paxlovid and being available in New Zealand.
Yes, you're correct. And I mean, this is a very exciting development to have access not just to what appears to be a very effective antiviral. Most antiviral tablets are not very effective, but this one is. But also we've managed to get it here. And from today, it's out in pharmacies, and from today it will be able to start being prescribed. It's for a very small group of people. It's people who are particularly at high risk of being hospitalised. They don't need to be hospitalised as yet. They don't need oxygen. And if they start this oral medication within 5 days of their infection, then it really greatly reduces the likelihood they will get seriously ill or be hospitalised. So it's an excellent development to have this now available out in our communities.
Okay, so if you're somebody at home who's struggling with COVID, perhaps it's particularly affected you, are you able to go to your GP and say, I want this pill, or is it going to only be prescribed to people who, say, asthmatic or have immunocompromised issues?
Yes, so it's quite a narrow set of criteria to ensure it's given to those who will benefit from it.
Is that just because we have limited supplies?
It's mostly because these are the people who the studies show it benefits, because the whole purpose of the tablet is not just to reduce symptoms in people who are otherwise well. It is to prevent people who otherwise are at high risk of being hospitalised from getting really unwell and ending up in hospital. So the criteria are narrow. They're on the Pharmac website. And of course, all our prescribers will actually have a good idea who the people are, for example, in their general practice, who would fit into the category for being eligible for this medication.
We're hearing
What I love about interviews on any media outlet is when you can see that the interviewer is looking for an obvious headline. Like they're coming across Ashley Bloomfield. Oh, is that because there's not enough? Is that because the government's fallen short and we don't have enough? And Ashley Bloomfield just goes,
Right?
no. Because of course, if he had said yes, the headline would have been failure by the government to bring enough pills into the country. And so it was great. Ashley Bloomfield just said no. But what I've always said about this, and I always want to do, you guys can jump in after this to talk about what he's just said, is I've talked about leading the horse to water. I always want to give out information that is accurate, that people can then say, oh, this is what the accurate. I was listening to a conversation yesterday and I heard that classic, oh, such and such said such and such. It's like, oh God, such and such. I've heard people say that they think because they've caught COVID and they're over it, that they've now got immunity for 18 years. Now, I don't know where that number came from. So what I want to be able to do is lead the horse to water with accurate information and say to you, for example, if you've caught COVID, you have antibodies for between 3 and 6 months. It could be up to 2 to 5 years, but significant antibody between 3 and 6 months before they wane. So I don't know where I don't even know where a year came from, let alone 18 years of immunity. So what we thought we'd do is Ashley Bloomfield has just said that the criteria is quite tight and they're on the Pharmac page. So in a minute, we're going to go to the Pharmac page and see what the criteria is. Then you will know, if you're watching, what the criteria is to get this pill. But firstly, boys, jump in.
Well, I missed most of that because my computer died. So I don't really have any comment.
It sounds like when the biggest sort of worry was hospitals being overloaded and that sort of thing, then I guess this is a fix to that side of the, if it works, if it's, and I guess we're about to see who it actually works for when we look at the Pharmac stuff. But yeah, I mean, that sort of fixes that side of the conversation of what makes it a sort of huge crisis on the healthcare system. Yeah, and
if this pill can keep some people at home and keep them away, part of me, from going to hospital, that's only going to help the pressure on the health system. I guess they're not saying, I know I've kind of said miracle pill is with my tongue in my cheek a little bit, but if it helps that, then go. I guess again, I do think, I mean, I'm genuine when I say my biggest desire is that people don't get this in a terrible situation. But if this turns into all the anti-vaxxers and all the people have taken all the risk, then just popping a pill and being fine, I mean, most of us will be like, that's why this thing has kind of turned a little bit into a selfish, for me, being honest, a bit selfish about this now. Like I've done my job. My household has done its job, bar one lunatic who no longer lives here. My small community has done its job to help the team of 5 million. There's enough people out there now going, fuck the team of 5 million, that I'm now looking at like I'm helping myself and helping, like I'm going to attempt, and I'm not, there's no reason why I will be able to do this, but I'm going to attempt not to catch it. It's all about me. So, for example, I wear a P2 mask at the moment. I've got none of them down here at the moment. I've only got one on my desk, which has got a valve in it. Now, all the masks with a valve don't protect the other person. They only protect you, because the valves allow you to breathe stuff out. So I'm wearing a P2 mask because it protects me, and it's incredibly comfortable. It's big on my big beard, and that's what I wear around town, because I'm looking after me now. If you're not on the camp enough where you're looking after doing it properly, and you put yourself at risk, I can't help you anymore. I've been doing it for over 2 years. So for me, I want my kids to look after themselves. I'm going to look after myself. I want my community to look after itself. And the irony is, if everyone did that, then we'd all be looked after. But I'm not going to look after all those people who are actively being led to water and then pissing in it. You guys can look after yourselves for the next 6 months. So that's maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm selfish. Maybe it's naive and immature, but that's where I'm at today.
I think that's a natural human response, as is sort of wanting a bit of cosmic justice. I've often said, hey, look, if the anti-vaxxers want to roll the dice and see, what is it, fuck around and find out, have at it. You've made your choice, and that would be great if the universe was a fair place, but we know it's not, and it'll just be something like they'll get through it scot-free, and then someone who has done 90% of it correctly manages to catch it in that 10% where it slips their mind and they end up in hospital. So yeah, I think it's a natural reaction to at one point go, you know what? Yeah, it's me time now.
Apart from the valve thing you're talking about, Pat, I mean, there's still little difference between me looking after myself and looking after the people around me when I'm out and about. So it hasn't even really crossed my mind any kind of difference between the two.
I mean, at the moment, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just, as experts have said to us on the show, they're often one and the same thing, right? The treating your day as if you have it, and treating the people around, pretending that people around you have it, are usually result in the same sort of precaution.
Well, I guess for me, and look, maybe people are going to criticize me for this, but I'm just being honest. I mean, if I had it, I wouldn't be wearing these masks, because these masks do let air out. They don't let anything in, but they let air out. So and to be honest with you, when I had someone in the house who had COVID, we all know that story now about someone who went to Invercargill and her whole family caught tonsillitis, and then she decided to come back to my house with a sore throat. So did you not know that story, Chewy? Do you know that story?
No, I hadn't heard that at all.
That's what happened in my house. Yes, someone went to Invercargill to see their family, and their whole family caught tonsillitis.
How weird!
A sickness that is not that you can't pass on, but they all caught tonsillitis, and then that person thought they'd come back to my house and bring COVID with them. Now, I that's why I've been a little bit anti this, and I've been pretty clear that if you do everything you can and you catch it, I'm with you, and I'm sorry, but if you fucking do all the stupidest things in the world and you don't see the signs that are blunt and obviously in front of you, then actually I'm pretty annoyed with you. So yeah, that person doesn't live in my house anymore. They chose to leave. Let me just make that clear. They chose to leave. I didn't kick them out. They chose to leave. But what I was just going to say is, during that 7 days when I was in ISO, I didn't hardly go out. In fact, I didn't go out because I was in isolation. But if I had people come here, like we had a Portaloo dropped off and stuff, I wore a different mask. It wasn't a P2. So because I was thinking about them then, because I didn't want to infect anybody if I was infected, which when I was about to say luckily we weren't. Fuck it, I'm not going to say luckily, because we followed the science, and so no one in the house got it. So
I mean, I'm acting under very for very selfish reasons at the moment. I have booked my first trip outside of the South Island for like 2.5 years.
Cool, man.
I'm going to see a punk rock show, and God damn it, if anyone fucks this up for me, I'm going to be furious. It's not going to be my fault. I'm doing what I need to do, but if someone fucks this up somehow.
My attitude kind of changed about the selfish nature of it once we saw that even if you're vaccinated, you can catch it. I mean, your chances are reduced, but you still can. That means I'm now not getting vaccinated for someone else. I'm now getting vaccinated that if I do catch it, I'm less likely to suffer serious symptoms. So that actually flipped it for me, because that became more about me than the community. And then that just kind of flowed on into other things. And the thing is, if everyone just looked after themselves 100%, then this would go away anyway. So I do understand that, even though I'm saying it's selfish, if everyone followed the same scheme, then it would be the same end. But not everyone is following that same scheme. Some people are, as I say, being led to water and then urinating in it after they've had fucking asparagus, which is terrible. Shall we have a look at what Pharmac actually said about the old magic pill that I've said? So this is the decision on access criteria for oral COVID-19 treatments. Now I won't read this whole thing out, but this is the criteria here, because one of the main points, we actually have to go to another site here. is it says that either the patient is immunocompromised and not expected to reliably mount an adequate immune response to COVID-19 vaccination or SARS-CoV-2, regardless of vaccination status, or the patient has at least 5 of the following. And it talks about the risk factor for severe COVID-19 disease identified by the Ministry of Health. So what we have to do is then go to what the risk factors are to the Ministry of Health. So so if you've got at least 5 of these, and this is significant in size, right? So it has to have at least 5 of these. People with compromised immunity. I'm not going to read all of these out because I'd be here longer than the fucking Grammy Awards. But people with compromised immunity. So, for example, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, bone marrow, organ transplantation, etc., etc., etc. People with high-risk medical conditions like chronic lung, like hypertension, diabetes, active cancer, morbid obesity, those kinds of things, right? Older people, people in aged care facilities, people who are pregnant and newborn babies, people with a disability, people living with mental health conditions and addictions, people of Māori and Pacific ethnicity, people who smoke, and that's basically it. So that's the criteria of higher risk. And so if you took off 5 of those, then you're eligible for this, at least 5 of those. It also lists in this one as well. Let me make that a little bit bigger, eh? There we go. It also lists in there as well. Again, it says Māori or Pacific ethnicity. Patient is age 65 and over, or is 50 and over, and has not completed a full course of vaccination. So that's kind of, on some level, kind of cool, because the government's actually saying, even if you haven't played your part in the vaccination process, you know, you're eligible for this, and that's all good. So that's the magic pill that I'm calling the magic pill, and they're the criteria if you are interested in getting it or if you need it. And it's available now, and even though a reporter tried to get a headline by saying if there's not enough in the country, there is. So if you fit that criteria, if you know someone who's kind of just showing signs of it, then they fit that criteria, then it should be something that you investigate as well, because it could make their path easier. So anything else you want to add to that, gentlemen, at all?
I just, well, very big picture sort of stuff, but I just think it's amazing that we can churn out like cures and vaccines and that sort of thing this quickly. You know, how long has it taken historically to develop stuff?
Yeah,
and then you just throw manpower and money at something, and you can really get shit done.
Alrighty, mighty. We're about to move on to our next subject. George, anything you want to finish off that one with? Just checking, so I don't cut you a bit short.
No.
All right. Let's have a look at one of our favorite topics of the last several days. Actually, let's start here. When the slap heard around the world happened, someone who was in the Academy, the Oscars, the Academy Awards, fired up their cell phone and started recording. I know it's a bit blurry, but this is in the ad break after the slap. That blurry circle there is Will Smith and Denzel Washington and Tyler Perry. So after he slapped Chris Rock, this is the ad break. And what they end up doing is praying with Will Smith. It goes on a bit more. Let me just skip forward. And then he's leaving here. He's getting a cuddle from Denzel. And that is Denzel. I can show you an image of that. And then he walks up to Bradley Cooper. That's him. That's Will Smith with Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper is talking to him. I won't say consulting. We don't know what was said here, but it's talking to him. And then as Will Smith leaves this sort of moment, he pulls out a white handkerchief and he wipes tears away from his eyes. Whether that's a moment that he was actually upset with himself, or just upset in general, or angry or sad, we don't know, but it caused a tear to flow. And it caused a handkerchief to be pulled out. So it's a significant sort of a time that they're spending together, Bradley Cooper and Will Smith there. Second hug there, and Will gives him the big pat on the back. And then this is where you see the hanky come out, and there you go, the eyes being dabbed there before he sits back down with his wife. So people have been asking and wanting to know what Denzel said to him. And one of the reasons they've been asking that is in the speech that Will Smith made, he said what Denzel had said to him about, when the devil's coming at you, you got to stay high, whatever it was. So Denzel was at a leadership summit in Washington, D.C. I think it was actually run by a pastor called T.D. Jakes. And obviously he was doing some kind of on-stage conversation. And this is what he explained to the guy Jakes, who was running the thing. He said, this is quoting Denzel exactly now, or directly. There's a saying, when the devil ignores you, then you know you're doing something wrong. The devil goes, oh no, leave him alone. He's my favorite. Conversely, when the devil comes to you, maybe it's because he's trying to do something right. And for whatever reason, the devil got hold of him that night. Later in the conversation, Denzel said, fortunately, this is of the getting out of a seat, etc. He said, fortunately, there were people there, not just me, but others. I don't want to say what we talked about, but there was, but for the grace of God, go any of us. There we go. Sorry. But for the grace of God, go any of us. Who are we to condemn? I don't know all the ins and outs of the situation, but I only know the situation needed prayer. That's the way I saw it. That's the way I see it. And finally, he was talking about why he got up out of his seat. The Jakes, the guy running the thing, said to him that you'd stepped into the middle of World War III. And he said, I couldn't have sat in my seat. No way. I couldn't have sat in my seat. That's just not who I am. So that was what happened in that embrace, in that moment, in that conversation. And whilst he didn't obviously say exactly what he talked about, Will Smith has cited him and has said that, he mentioned the devil and the devil will come for you. And, Denzel is a very kind of spiritual sort of man. I guess the thing that I find, and look, I'm a gracious person and I understand there, but for the grace of God, go I in many situations, but I just can't ever see myself in the situation there. But for the grace of God, I walk up and smash someone in the face. I don't know if I agree or disagree with that statement there, but I guess technically it's correct. Gentlemen, anything you want to add to that conversation? Jump in.
I just find American religion very strange. Personally, I don't think it's really a comment on this specific instance, but it's so public, and yeah, it's very them. But yeah, I think you made some comments about Will Smith's speech that he's just following God's plan for him and that sort of thing, and it's like you said, then it's never his decision. Oh, the devil made him do it, or God has a plan for him. It's never him.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when you invoke a higher power, you're kind of saying you can't question me.
Yeah,
it's one of the classic debating techniques when you try and ask someone, why did this happen, or why do you believe this, or what do you see? If they go, well, God, then that sort of it's the end of the conversation for them, because they don't need to go any further. So if you invoke, the devil will attack you, then you're actually you're absolving yourself of responsibility, and you're saying, don't question me, because it's like the Blues Brothers. We're on a mission from God. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no other justification needed after that.
Yeah.
And this is coming from someone who's, got a fairly religious background, and sort of I understand it and I understand the concept, but I also understand that when you go, well, God, then actually you've stopped the conversation. You've given yourself an out for accountability. You're kind of going, it wasn't me. It was, something overcame me and it wasn't actually me. And I don't accept any of that. It's like the classic thing amongst the religious people. They talk about trusting God and trusting God blindly. And I say, so next time you're crossing the road, I'd like to see you, cover your eyes completely and walk across that intersection, trusting God. And they go, well, I won't do that. And I'm like, of course you won't, because we have intelligence and senses and we have things that we don't. But when it suits you to go, well, God, then that's when I have a problem with the conversation.
Is Will Smith, I know he's associated with Scientology, but...
Oh, you're going to say a sociopath there for a second. A sociopath. No, okay.
Scientology?
It's really interesting you would say that, because I haven't talked about this yet, but I've been thinking about it. If you look at a bunch of the work that Louis Theroux has done on Scientology, a movie that he put out recently about how Scientologists speak and how they control, I thought about that when I saw the reaction from Will Smith, keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth. And I was like, that is really interesting. And I wonder if there's any we hear stories about those in Scientology, and I'll say allegedly, I don't need a lawsuit, being fairly abusive to people in the Sea Org and being fairly abusive to people who are their kind of helpers and that kind of stuff as well. And if that's true, and if Will Smith is associated in that group, then maybe he slipped into a mode that he's used to speaking to people about or whatever in another part of his life. Now, allegedly, I don't know that for a fact, but it was something that crossed my mind. If you haven't seen the latest Louis Theroux, sorry, I'm saying it like that because I've got Louis C.K. in my head, Louis Theroux movie where he basically set up a series of, he mocked them up, but he had former Scientologists advising him on how to make it look real. And when he made these meetings, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. All these former Scientologists were like, this is exactly how it felt, and wasn't that. And it's a lot of screaming and yelling and talking down to people and abuse and that kind of stuff. Now, allegedly, we don't know what happened behind those closed doors, but it was something that I thought about, George, when I saw the face that Will Smith was pulling and the vitriol he was throwing at Chris Rock in that moment.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the particular American flavor of Christianity, and then add into that Tinseltown, and then add into that the flavor of Scientology, and you've got a big recipe for, as you say, control, magically sort of coming up with rationale for violence and actions that aren't great. You got this big, colorful mixture of basically, of rationale.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been doing a quick search around. Apparently, well, I mean, it depends. Will Smith describes himself as a Christian from a Baptist background. The only real links that I can see with him and Jada towards Scientology is that they set up a school a little while ago. But even then, the websites that I'm looking at, I wouldn't 100% trust the angle that they're playing on that one. So, I don't know if he is involved with Scientology.
It's certainly around him.
He's done a Scientology
that
movie.
I can believe. Yeah.
And look, so this is, if you can watch the footage in the background, I'm not going to play the audio because it'll get us pulled, but you can see that Marty Rathbun there is a former Inspector General Church of Scientology. I think he has disavowed this movie since it's happened. I'm not sure why. Certainly someone who was involved with it did. But during that, he was the guy. He was like the enforcer, and he was the guy that set up the trials that they did in this movie, and what they were supposed to kind of show and make them as accurate as possible. Wondering if there's any in the trailer that actually. So you saw that guy just shouting and screaming and a bunch of other former Scientologists kind of confirmed this is how it was. Again, maybe what I'm doing now is just saying this is quite an interesting movie that people might want to check out as well. It's called My Scientology Movie. But all I'm saying is that it did make me think about Scientology, Will Smith, and that moment when I saw it as well. So you brought it up, George. That's basically why. So anywho, which kind of leads us, unless there's anything else with those ones, lads, but leads us into the next part of this conversation, which is sort of another Hollywood type conversation, which is the Grammys that happened yesterday. And firstly, let me just say that I'm shocked with how many Grammys get given out now. Like this says here, the Grammy winners 2022 full list of Grammy Award winners, but then it just says here it's actually only the full list of key winners. So there's tons of other categories other than this, and there's just so many categories at the Grammys that you can win. They go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. There was a New Zealander who won, like they're still going. Remember, this is just the key categories. This is not the behind the scenes the week before. There was actually a Kiwi who was in here. Best choral performance. There was a New Zealander who won a Grammy yesterday. But one of the reasons I think we haven't really heard much about that is I think that there are so many Grammy categories these days that probably proportionally we should expect at least one New Zealander every year to win a Grammy. It's not like the old days when Kimbro got hers and Lord got hers sort of thing. But there are so many categories now that I just wonder if it's actually expected. You know, if you'd worked out the population of the world and you worked out the New Zealand per capita, probably we should get one every single year because the categories are so vast. And on top of that, you don't even need to be involved in the music industry or a musician to win a Grammy these days. That's how far outside the world of what it used to be has gone. You can win a Grammy for being a teacher. And that's great. That's fine. I mean, let's honor our teachers for having people getting into music. But it's like, you know, you don't win the World Cricket Cup for being, you don't get a little award for being the cricket coach at the local club. You know, it's only those people at the top, the people who are performing and doing, that win the award. But now the awards become so spread so far and wide, and let's say so inclusive, if that's the right word, that you don't even need to, you know, have a hit single to win a Grammy award these days. It was a really interesting watch, especially because the audience would have been way up because of what had happened the week before at the Oscars. Did you guys check in the Grammys at all? Did you check anything out?
No, I've seen a couple of clips. Billie Eilish's performance was amazing. But that's literally all I've seen is that clip.
One of the things me and George talked about yesterday was Kanye West was up for 4 awards. I think his album had 160 attributions on it. So sorry, for people who don't know what that means, 160 people contributed to his album. How the fuck is it a Kanye West album? It's 160 people contributing to it. And in 2022, they changed the rules around the Grammys. And from 2022 or before, you had to be responsible for 33% of the content on your album to actually have it entered in the awards. Now that's not the case. So, 160 people, groups, organizations, bands were attributed, which means were named as contributing to the album that Kanye West had in there for best album.
Is that people that are legit on that album or people that are just on the Kanye gravy train?
It could also be like, especially in the world of R&B and hip hop, it could be a sampling. So it could be a composer from 20 years ago if you've sampled them. It could be a producer, it could be a writer, it could be all sorts of stuff. So that's one of the things the story actually said yesterday was because of, sampling of other music and stuff, actually is one of the reasons that there are so many people being attributed to these albums. But, respectfully, I mean, we all saw we joked about it yesterday, I should have brought it up, that there was a meme going around sort of 10 years ago, before memes were memes, kind of criticizing Beyonce for having 6 writers and 4 producers for her songs, when Queen had 1 writer and 1 producer. Now there's 160 people contributing to an album. It's like Beyonce's 10 years ago, 6 writers, 4 producers seems quaint. And no one seems to be, when I say no one, I haven't seen anyone sort of criticizing Kanye for 160.
It definitely sounds like the way that the industry awards people are sort of deciding this stuff has changed, right? Of course, even your local band, 160 people have sort of, in some way contributed to the album, right? It's just a different sort of measurement of attribution and credit. I wonder if maybe the special thanks to is sort of bleeding into the
but that's not
attribution
attribution. Attribution is a legal thing, meaning these people get money if this track makes it to number 1. So the thanks to is not that. I mean, when you said 160 people to a local album, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that would be the case, being involved in making a few albums as sort of the producing management side of things. I mean,
wait, didn't you just say that there's like artists from samples in Kanye West's thing?
Yeah, but they get paid. I mean, it's not the thanks.
I thought they're getting the award.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, so it's clear, it wouldn't include the thanks to. That's not attribution. Attribution is, when you are actually a part of the song somehow. So the classic, which is, the song that Puff Daddy did to Biggie Smalls when Biggie Smalls died and he took a Police sample, right? That sample, that track is an attribution. Well, they didn't attribute it. That's why they lost all their money over it. But there's an attribution, which means Sting was due money for that album. So attributions are part of the financials of this album. So it's not just like a thanks to mum, a thanks to dad, to my
totally,
pizza.
It's actually different as well. Then if we're starting to give awards and money to people that are sampled in music, that changes a lot.
Yeah, well, I guess when they talk about the album, I guess it's like 12, 14 tracks, 160 people. If he did win it, which I don't think he did, would all 160 of those been classed as award winners? I'm not actually sure of the answer to that. But just to be clear, an attribution is something that is a kind of legal connection to that product, as opposed to thanks to my high school teacher who inspired me to do this. So 160 people or groups or whatever the entity is have a legal recourse to some part of that album. And when I say legal, I'm basically saying financial recourse. So they have to, because if they didn't attribute them, then it would be theft and copyright infringements. So that's
Holy
why.
shit.
So it's pretty massive. But it's a reflection of how music's being made today, I guess. But also, I wonder how many attributions there are on, and not that I'm bigging up him, but the Ed Sheeran albums. One of the things I was most impressed with, that was sort of my kid's first big concert, was when Ed Sheeran was in Dunedin. I took my 3 along to it, and he was on stage by himself the whole show, one guitar and him and a loop machine. So I wonder, look at his attribution list. I bet you it's a lot smaller.
I think it's definitely something to look into, because it's the Grammys changed how they measured things, right? With the 33% thing. That's not a legal thing. That's an awards thing.
Correct. That's not correct.
Yeah.
But also, it's not. I wouldn't expect every person who attributed to an album to then win a Grammy, because it's like if the Foo Fighters record a song, and in that song they've paid someone to play the violin, and that song wins best song, the violin player doesn't necessarily get it because they've been employed to play the Foo Fighters music, and that's the Foo Fighters award. And the violin person wouldn't necessarily get an award for that as well. Actually, I'm not 100% sure on that though, so maybe that's worth looking at as well. But look, anything from you for that, Joe, before we jump into the second part of this whole Grammy thing?
No, I'm good.
Which is maybe more your wheelhouse, because you're a comedian, not because of any other connection to Louis C.K. Let's just make that very clear. Is that we talked about Will Smith. We've talked about him today. We've talked about him. We haven't really talked about what's going to happen, but what could happen. Louis C.K., who was removed from, sort of self-removed. He removed himself from the public eye in 2017 over some Me Too accusations and accurate accusations. What do you call that? Because it wasn't like a crime, but it was like because the Me Too movement.
Because he got his dick out.
Well, he got his dick out. He won the comedy award yesterday. There hasn't been a lot of noise about this, but some are unhappy. Let's have a quick look at part of this.
Grammys 2022 viewers are in an uproar online after seeing a disgraced comedian Louis C.K. win an award for Best Comedy Album. The 54-year-old comedian was certainly a controversial nominee at this year's award show, and many viewers watching from home were quick to express their shock over Louis winning this award. However, the Recording Academy's CEO Harvey Mason Jr. responded to the backlash online and basically said that they don't consider someone being canceled on Twitter a good enough of a reason to exclude them from the award ceremony. In a statement, he said, "We won't restrict the people who can submit their material for consideration. We won't look."
So let's just pause it on that, because that's a part of what we were talking about. So this is the group that run the Grammys. We won't look back at people's history. We won't look at their criminal record. We won't look at anything other than the legality within our rules of, is it recording for the work eligible based on a date and other criteria? If it is, then they can submit it for consideration. Now, I'm sure it has happened. What's his name? Gary Glitter. If some pedophile, rapist put in an album next year, I'm sure they'd figure out a way that they could deny it based on criminal record. But that's what they said about Louis C.K. Yet it does seem a little bit hypocritical that if they have these rules in place where they won't ban people from entering, Kanye has been saying some untoward things on Instagram, and they cancelled his performance. So he was booked to perform at the Grammys. So it says here, the Yeezy designer was pulled from his musical lineup due to his recent Instagram activity, which included slinging racial slurs at Trevor Noah. A source told Us, or US, or Us, whatever it is at the time. West had also been slamming his ex-wife Kim Kardashian and her boyfriend Pete Davidson online. So let's move away from Louis C.K., because I don't think what he did was criminal. I'm not sure about that, but they'll be happy to have criminal history be ignored to still enter the awards. But if you've been a bit mean on Instagram, they're going to stop you performing. It does seem a little bit strangely hypocritical to me. What about you guys?
I would say that what Louis C.K. did was criminal. If I whipped my cock out on a bus and masturbated in front of someone, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't just be cancelled.
Okay.
I think his fame and success did protect him in that case, and the power imbalance involved in what he did worries me enormously.
Do you think, therefore, they were referencing him when they said that? Do you think they were referencing Louis C.K. when they talked about their criminal record? I mean, when I say it wasn't criminal, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is he wasn't convicted of a crime. There was no charges.
Yeah.
Whether it was criminal or not, you're saying you think that it probably rose to the level of being criminal.
Yeah,
I
think if someone had decided to press charges, I think, you know, you'd be on pretty solid ground there.
Right,
I think what the Grammys have done with that statement is cast a really big net. Because when you're talking about entertainers and their lifestyles and stuff like that, you are going to come up against someone that has done something questionable under the law. You know, drug use. You drove your Rolls Royce up the footpath. You know, that sort of thing. And I think what they're saying is that we won't look at that if someone submits their work. I think it's kind of fair enough. You know, sure, put it in the pot. We'll look at it. You know, we won't consider what's going on outside of that body of work. And then I think what they're doing with Kanye, I mean, they didn't scrub his album from the awards.
he won 2 out of 4 awards at the same thing.
So I mean, that fits their statement of what they wanted to do there. They didn't want someone that, in my opinion, is going through a bipolar episode up on stage when he's been so recently, you know. Do you know what Kanye would do if you put him on stage at the Grammys at the moment? No. So let's maybe pass on that one, eh?
And I think probably, I don't know if their decision happened after the Will Smith incident or before, but after the Will Smith incident, I think a lot of people were going, oh, let's see what Kanye does. If Will Smith's man, I mean, Kanye's probably the happiest person in the world this week that finally has, you know, what he did to Taylor Swift now becomes at least second in the most embarrassing moments at an award show behind Will Smith.
Even with his insanity around Pete Davidson. You know, I saw one of the very early comments when Will Smith did what he did is that Kanye must be stoked. He's not the craziest one on the block at the moment. He's not the only one having a mental breakdown. It's just messy, and I think the Grammys not wanting him up on stage is just wanting to avoid the mess.
So fair enough. It's a business venture. It's a private business. If they want to stop someone, they can stop someone. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're going to talk about people being cancelled, and I know you hate that word, and to be honest, so do I. It's not so much a formal, like, you have been issued the certificate of cancellation. You have been cancelled, sir. Good day. It's people deciding that they don't want to, like, I like Louis C.K. I've enjoyed his specials and comedy. I loved his the sitcom's really the wrong word for it, but I loved Louis. But certainly when it came out that he was a creepy sneak masturbator in a green room, you know, I've been in a green room. It's a very close, you know, you're prepping for a show. If someone just was like standing in the corner beating it in front of me, I'd be like, man, not cool. And it was just like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to watch this special or this piece of work that he's in and not think about that.
Yeah. And that's probably the same thing with the Will Smith stuff. Like I saw a headline, I didn't read the story, so if you've read it, you'll know more than me. Is that Netflix has already put any of his future projects on hold. Apparently he had quite a big project with Netflix set up for next year, and that's been put on hold because I'm a bit the same. Like I've said all the way through, I love Will Smith. Contrary to some of the commenters on my post about it on YouTube telling me that as a white man I can't cancel a black man, I've never wanted to cancel any man. Like you say, I don't like the term. I guess when I say I don't like I think using it for Kanye's performance is accurate because he was booked and then they cancelled his booking. But I think the way it's used in the whole kind of cancel culture thing that's what I try to avoid if I can at any cost. Because
I mean, Will Smith is a very bankable name. I think it'll be literally going, hey man, we're just going to pump the brakes on this. You're obviously going through some stuff, so and we'll just let this all die down, which is exactly what Louis C.K.'s done. It came out, he said a few things, and he went away. You heard nothing about him, and it wasn't just that people had cancelled it. He was laying low. And then he knew whatever was going to come up, he's obviously worked on something, submitted it to the Grammys and won. That's him coming back. And here we are, we're talking about it again. So, there's cancellation, and then there's being really smart from a public relations point of view and going, I am just going to go away for a bit.
Well, the big thing that Louis did, which Will Smith missed his opportunity for, he went, these women are completely correct. I overstepped the mark. I was wrong. They're right. Like it was mea culpa from almost second one. That was the thing. And that's one of the differences here. And whereas Will Smith got up and talked about how it was his job to protect women. So, it will be interesting to see what happens with Will Smith in 5 years from now, 4 years from now, 3 years from now.
I think we'll see him in a much shorter timeline than that. But I think if I was the person advising someone in that sort of situation, it's like, cool, go on holiday, just get the fuck out, rest up. We're not going to make any more comments. That's it. That's done. And you're going to just work on a project and come back, and then the talk is just going to be about the project, and everyone will forget because people like Will Smith. They want to like.
Here's the question then: do you think what happened at the Oscars today is helping or harming his product? Now, let me put a couple of caveats. I saw on TVNZ On Demand the other day an advert for Bel Air coming up, which is like a retelling of The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, but in a more dramatic way. And one of the quote lines was, "You could never take the Philly out of me." That's interesting to put out, like literally right now, that I'm from a rough, tough neighborhood. But I was thinking about it, and I haven't done it, but I wonder if his numbers on Spotify went up after it, or I wonder if they went down, or I wonder if they stayed steady. So today, do you think that Will Smith has seen a boost from all this controversy around the content he has out there today, or not? I mean, we don't know, but I'm just saying, what do you think?
Yeah, for his content, I would say probably not. For his personal life, I mean, certainly, I think people would be digging into his background and seeing what, the juicy, gossipy sort of stuff does, but it hasn't changed my opinion of his movies. I don't think I'm more or less likely to watch something with Will Smith in it at the moment. But that's I'm still keen to see the Bel Air remake. It sounds like
that's really interesting because on one level you're saying you couldn't watch a Louis C.K. stand up without those thoughts, but what, you could watch a Will Smith movie without those thoughts for Will Smith?
Yeah, well, certainly comparing them, when the Louis C.K. thing was fresh, I certainly didn't want to sit down and watch a Louis C.K. thing. And maybe that's just because of the type of person that Louis portrays himself in. A lot of, he does portray himself as a dirtbag, and that played into his apology as well. It was like, yeah, I did a dirtbag thing because I'm a dirtbag, and I'm sorry. It came across to me at the time as a very sincere and honest apology. But at the time, it was just like, I don't know. They're also very different things that the two did. Violence versus creepy sexual shit.
Yeah.
Probably, but no, I mean, that's a fair comparison to make in my reaction, certainly.
Well, yeah, but probably also different people will find different things more abhorrent. Like and I'm not saying anyone here is going to comment on what they do, but if someone found what Will Smith did do to be more abhorrent than what Louis C.K. did, then maybe you'll lean towards accepting back Louis. If it was the other way, you'll lean back towards accepting back Will. And I guess
I think timing comes into it a lot. I mean, you pointed out that Louis' stuff blew up when Me Too was really in full force at that point. Yeah. And it was just like you were just hearing about women in the entertainment space time and time and time again about the shit that they have to deal with. And it was just like, Louis, you're one of my guys and you're one of them as well. Fuck. you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of betrayal side of things, I guess, for someone I've never met.
Yeah, no,
You
but
know?
it isn't. I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, of all the people, like I loved Louis C.K. stand up. Haven't seen his new stuff. Haven't got around to it. Would I watch it? I'll probably watch the new thing that he's just won for. But I remember thinking, yeah, it's almost like because then you don't have permission to like him anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you can't then go like, here's my latest offering from Louis C.K. Isn't it amazing? Like a week after he's just admitted to all these things, so it's like he's been taken away from you.
Yeah.
which is
I think
fine
that's fair.
and appropriate. But yeah, I remember thinking the same sort of thing. You know, fuck, now I don't have him to listen to anymore. You know, like it's a bit like I said. I don't know if I said it on air or beforehand with you guys, but Taylor Hawkins is the same. Like the Foo Fighters, I kind of almost feel dead to me now. Not because I dislike them anymore, but I can't imagine. Although watching the Grammys, I thought about what's his name from Blink-182, Travis Barker, drumming for the Foo Fighters. I thought that's an interesting thought in a couple of years' time.
He's a phenomenal drummer.
Yeah.
Very good drummer.
But
yeah,
I mean, it's like if anybody, not him, you know, because now the Foo Fighters feel like they're done. So it's so sad. But anyway, hey guys, unless there's anything else you want to wrap up with, we say congratulations to John Campbell for retiring from TVNZ. We're not going to show anything or do anything. I remember, you know, I've worked with Petra Baggis for quite a long time, and one of the things that they were most excited about when she left TVNZ Breakfast was nobody knew. I can remember watching it actually. They kept it a secret and they announced it on air. And one of the things they did was kind of high-fived each other because the secret didn't sneak out. So good on you, John Campbell, for keeping it on the DL. I haven't heard it around the traps. So
I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I think if he's getting into that space, especially as we wind up to an election, I think he can really do some good out there.
Yeah, maybe we can get him to be a regular co-host on this. He's got some time now. All right, well, let's wrap up, shall we? Anything else from you, George, before we head off into the deep blue yonder?
No.
Shall we?
No, I'm all good, mate.
Thanks for joining us again today. Thanks for being a part of Big Hairy News. We'll be back tomorrow morning from 11 o'clock. We are thinking maybe in the next a couple of weeks, and you're welcome to share your thoughts on this if you're watching, that we might slide this into midday till 1 rather than 11 till 12, just to see how people feel about it, what they think. This is very much a soft launch, meaning we're just kind of feeling it out and trying things out to see how this all works. So maybe we will try a different time. If you're watching this or you're watching this on demand, feel free to put in the comments what times would work best for you. We do like people interacting with us during the live conversation. So, you know, if there's more people around at midday than 11, then maybe that's a good idea. But we'll keep you up to date. As soon as we know, you'll know, because we won't be here at 11 o'clock. Should we change for a week? You'll tune in, you'll be like, what's going on? What's going on? It's like, no, here at midday. But for now, we'll be back again tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, George. Thanks, Chewy. And until next time, we'll see you. Hooroo.